how to spice up your engineering design challenges for more advanced students and more older students. We'll get right into it next. Hey, this is Moni Singh, an engineer, a creator, a mother, and a lifelong learner. Many people know me as Miss STEM, the founder of the STEM for Kids movement. I created this channel to help you raise your children, your students, for success in this ever transforming world laced with increasing digital influence. You watch these videos because you know that there's something more inside your kids. They got the Elon Musk type of talent hidden inside them. If you haven't done so, hit the subscribe button. And I share regularly, and as a subscriber, you have access to the practical tips, tools, and resources to raise resilient creators. All right, so we have been discussing engineering design projects as a way to show children how to solve problems. And we discussed the step process. It's a very structured process, allows children to think in a structured way around solving problems. And these could be challenges that you give them as you're trying to encourage them to solve problems creatively. And in this process, you are bringing in other elements. Of course, there's the core idea that they're working on, and then trying to create a solution around that. But the way the process is structured, it allows for the children to communicate, to collaborate, to engage in critical thinking, as well as showcase their creativity in coming up with different solutions, as well as also to practice coping mechanisms, because most of these engineering design projects, actually any kind of challenges, are laced with mistakes and failures. And the process again allows for the children to work through that and to find out ways dealing with adversities and build on that resilience muscle as they are trying to get more creative in the process. So, one of the things I wanted to touch upon today, we have talked about the 5 steps of the process already. We've gone into details on the how to set the goals clearly, to have very clear articulation of what these are, how to clarify those by asking questions, imagining a solution, then planning out your solution, creating it, and then improvising it. And remember, it is a cyclical process, continuous improvement, as there will be opportunities to improve upon and make that product at creation better as children go forward. So now, though, I wanted to give you some flavor, some variations that you can introduce into your engineering design projects. Sometimes you're looking to engage those minds, the maybe advanced students, or you're just trying to make the challenge a little bit more challenging for your students. Maybe you're working with some older children, and you want to give them a higher level of challenge. And there are some ways in which you can make that happen. um, Now, in a real life setting, engineers are always working with different constraints, right? So, the 3 main ones are time, money, and people. So, for example, if you think about the new merchandise that comes about typically during the holiday gift giving seasons, Thanksgiving and Christmas, there's so much new product that's available for people to buy and to gift to each other. But in order for all that inventory or the supply to be available in stock on the shelf to be delivered, the manufacturers are actually thinking ahead and thinking ahead in terms of time management to make sure that they can have the adequate amount of supplies during that time frame. They also have to plan ahead in terms of how many sales do they expect to make, and they have to think ahead and produce and have everything ready to go when the shopping spree happens. So there's always that time constraint, right? Because if they miss that window, when people are buying around that Thanksgiving to Christmas time frame, they lost that that sales volume that they typically get, especially if you're in that retail business, right? You lose that time window. So timing is very critical. And the real in real situations, you have to manage towards the time and make sure that you're ready for whatever that season is, or whatever your customer requirements are, and you're able to deliver right on time. So time is always one very major constraints that people have to deal with. Money. That's the other big one, right? We always are looking into some kind of budget constraints. Nobody has unlimited budget, right? So, in given that consideration, making sure that whatever you're devising is going to meet the meet the money goals, right? Because uh, for businesses, right, the way this works is that, let's say they're making this pen, and they know that, yeah, they'll in their initial market research, they will figure out that they can probably sell this pen for, let's say, $10, right? And I'm just making this up. Their market research indicates that they can sell it for $10. And so now they have to make sure that in order to be profitable, that they build it at a certain cost, so that when you after you look at the cost of the product itself, all the materials that go into this to make this pen, and then the actual manufacturing process, the cost of labor and everything else that goes into there, then the cost of logistics to actually move the product from point A to point B, the actual cost of sales, maybe you have to pay, if you're selling it on Amazon, you have to pay Amazon fees, right? So account for all the different costs that will add from the production of the product all the way to actually delivering it to the customer. They want to make sure that they can at least make some profit, enough profit on this pen for it to be justifiable, right? For them to be willing to sell this pen, it needs to make some money for them. So that's why, they have, and in the beginning of this process, they would probably have thought about that, given that we can sell it for $10, and let's say their goal is to make at least $2 in profit. That means all the cost items I talked about should all fit within the $8. So that's the budget for them, right? So companies would come up with that budget, and they want to make sure that the production of this product happens within that budget. So budget is always, it's a big consideration and a big constraint to manage towards. And the third one is people, right? So in many cases, I know there is a lot of automation coming into play, but people play a big role in making sure that you have enough staff, enough skilled staff in terms of what you need to make things happen, and paying attention to that. If you look back at the impact of COVID, especially when the travel opened up, I'm talking about the late 2021 timeframe. So COVID happened in 2020, and then the airline industry was almost shut down, right? Everything. So when it shut down, or when the demand was so low, most of the airlines actually ended up laying off their staff, right? So they were very thin in terms of staffing capacity. And so when the travel picked up in 2021, what happened is that there were many people traveling, and the airline were not prepared. The staff, they did not have enough staff to sustain that kind of a demand, that kind of travel volume, and that led to many cancellations. There were just too many flight disruptions and all that stuff, because they just didn't have enough people, the manpower to make things happen. So again, that's people is another dimension that companies have to really pay attention to as they think about their processes, right? And so when we talk about now the engineering design process from a children's perspective, yeah, those are some, three constraints that you can bring in different ways, and I'll give you some examples of that, to mimic the real world constraints in a children friendly way. So the first one I talked about was a time constraint, right? So time constraint is simple. Depending on the kind of project you're working with, you can give them a time constraint that they only have 30 minutes to come up with a solution, or that's a simple one, 30 minutes, an hour, depending on how complex that project is. And In many projects, especially the older kids, are working on lots of time commitments anyways. The schedule and managing everything to a schedule. You can even have other schedules in there, so not just the final deadline, but also the fact that they need to finish their imagine and planning stages by a certain time frame. If they're not here, if they're not showing their plans to you by that time frame, they're missed. That could be a check a checklist item for the judge at the end of the project. So you could do that. In terms of budget, that's a very interesting one. And you could actually have some budget assigned to each of the projects. And along with that, you can have the materials have a price, have a cost to them. So that means that that also gives an incentive for the kids not to waste their materials and to really think hard in their plan about how exactly and what exactly do they need to use. You could actually have like a materials depot or an inventory or a supply store within your classroom where you have all these materials. So again, I know they sound like big fangled words, but really, let's say you are working on an engineering design project of making a skyscraper using marshmallows and toothpicks, right? And you can have your material depot, which has the marshmallows and the toothpicks, and you could have each of those materials have a price tag on them. So, for example, each toothpick costs $1 and each marshmallow costs $2, right? And the total budget that the children have is $200. And so they have to make their skyscraper within that budget. So now they really need to think hard about the materials, how they're going to plan everything so that they can stay within the budget and still make maybe the tallest skyscraper, right? So it's a competition too in there. So that makes it really interesting. If you are using Minecraft, which is a great way to do any of these projects, and in Minecraft too, you can set up your materials depot. And uh, I'll put a little snippet of a video or a link here, so you can take a look at that and look at an example of how you can do that in Minecraft. And again, have children buy materials, spend the money, to make their virtual worlds in Minecraft. It's super cool, and it's it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of learning for children because at this age, children don't pay much attention to money and the financial matters, right? But we all know that financial savviness is so critical. So the sooner we can get children thinking about the money matters, don't you think it'll be a little bit better for everyone? So yes, you can add that element into your projects as well and make it a little fun. The third dimension I talked about was people, and this one is an interesting one where you can introduce some setbacks. If they're working in teams, you could maybe have one of the team members just sit out for some time during the project. They're not allowed to work. Maybe they're sick. Or you could have team members work with only one hand. Their left hand is not, they can't use their left hand. So things you can actually basically you're creating constraints on manpower that way, right? You're limiting the capacity that's available, and that starts to create uh, some semblance to reality and how you can and explain it to them, right? That you're trying to mimic that condition in this situation so they can experience it and they can figure out, maybe plan out a little bit differently. So if one person has to set out, and let's say the group was 4 people before and now it's only 3, now how do they, for that amount of time, how do they plan their work? Especially if there was time constraints overall in the project, and now you have one member set out, and they have to quickly revise their plan so that they could still meet the time deadlines, but with the limitation of one member sitting out. So it's like throwing in different curveballs. Keeps it exciting, makes it more challenging, and provides more unique learning opportunities and more opportunities which are connected to the real world for children to think critically and to work out solutions. Hey, now that you have watched this or heard what I just shared, go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. And also, depending on which platform you're on, go ahead and give me a 5-star rating or like and comment. And also share this resource with your friends and relatives so that they can also get their hands on all this valuable information that I'm sharing. Now, one more thing, I am giving away my 7 C's blueprint for raising successful children. So if you have not gotten a copy yet, go ahead and do that right away. You can go to www.raisingresilientcreators.com. The link is down in the description. So go ahead, click on it and get that resource. It's a very valuable resource that can help you with your priority of getting your children on the pathway towards success. So with that, again, subscribe to the channel and go ahead and get that resource right away.